Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session. My name is Manish Koval. I lead our AWS practice at Wipro. We have a very interesting panel today to talk about building smart applications on cloud, right? And how to use the smart applications to provide a better customer experience and worker experience. So that's what the panel is going to be talking about. So let me just quickly introduce the panel to you. We have Ramesh Nagarajan, Senior Vice President of Cloud at Wipro.
Hello, everyone. Good morning.
We have Sid Nag. He's the Research Director at Gartner for Cloud.
Good morning.
We have Shirish Lal. He's the COO and CTO of Hart Hanks.
Good morning.
We have Glenn Weinstein. He's the CIO and co-founder of Apperio, now a Wipro company.
Good morning.
And we have Kiran Desai, who heads our global infrastructure services.
Good morning.
So, first, thank you all for making the time. I know a lot of you have been out at parties and all, so thanks for being here early in the morning today. And just kicking off the session about smart applications, right? So, Ramesh, why don't you get started with what are smart applications?
Yeah, definitely, Manish. So, the customer requirements are quite varying, and they're rapidly varying. And so is the technology. So if you have to marry the number of technologies and solve the customer problem, you need to come up with a new age of applications, which we call as smart applications. So what is smart? We are trying to give a definition here. So a smart application is aware. Aware in the sense it is natural, it is responsive, and it is adaptive, and those are the adjectives that I will attach to aware. And it is intelligent, and it is learning from insights, it's learning from data, and it is autonomous in the sense that it can scale itself, it can heal itself, it can be intelligent to be adaptive. And that are the three main attributes that we give to the word smart. And so if you really look at the smartness, they are backed up by four imperatives. First, a smart application has to be interacting smartly, which means that it has to be interacting in multi-channel, and which are speech, text, audio, video, on all of them. Second is they must be based on smart processes, which are customer friendly, which solve a business problem uniquely, which probably uses IoT, AR, VR kind of technologies. And third is must be based on a smart platform. And cloud being one of the smart platforms, cloud exposes a lot of services. AI, ML, database, and so on and so forth. And all of these services makes cloud as a podium where we can construct an application and through composing using these services. So it becomes a smart platform. And the other attribute of smart application is it is smart in security sense, because it is adaptive authentication and uses cognitive techniques to defend of attacks, etc. So if you really look at it, can all the applications that we produce have all these attributes? Need not be. They can have a set of attributes from this set and probably keep learning and growing. And cloud exposing a lot of past services, and Amazon like a platform is an ideal platform for building smart applications. And now I'll pause here and hand off for an external perspective on how the smart applications are changing the world. What do you, Sid?
Thanks, Ramesh. Yeah, so I'll just give you guys a little bit of insight into what's going on in the industry. So I bring the industry perspective to this conversation. So from that perspective, so Ramesh talked about interactive applications. He talked about the processes, the idea of cloud as a platform, and then the security aspect. So I think all of that kind of ties into what we're seeing at Gartner in terms of how organizations are moving applications from on-premises to the cloud. This one? Okay. On-premises, okay, got it. So yeah, thank you. On-premises to the cloud, but also in terms of what we're seeing, where the processes and automations are being brought into the picture. How are you building these applications with things like artificial intelligence, with things like machine learning, with natural language processing? So for example, we have companies that are looking at building applications based on requirements that are being scanned by a natural language processor. So you don't have to read requirements and build applications anymore. You have things like serverless compute from a cloud perspective as a platform, for example, AWS Lambda function, right? How do you look at the security aspect of it? How do you detect security anomalies, right, in terms of using, again, pattern recognitions and things of that nature? So I'll get into some of those aspects of how the industry is evolving in building smart applications. So I think one of the things to bear in mind right up front is that don't think of building applications in the cloud or smart applications for that matter solely to save costs, because that's not the sort of the end goal here. As a matter of fact, at Gartner, we believe that when you start to make your journey to the cloud, you're going to experience a sort of cost positive and a cost neutral situation, because you're not going to flip a switch and move all your applications to the cloud overnight. So you're actually going to be running in what we call at Gartner the bimodal operation. So you're going to have the mode one, where you have a lot of what I call production-oriented application that will continue to run, leveraging some more advanced cloud technologies in our, for example, if you look at the Gartner hype cycle, you look at mature technologies like infrastructure and software as a service that are more adapted into mode one situation. Whereas if you look at mode two, you're going to do more experimental stuff. You're going to use things like advanced platform as a service technologies. You may use things like microservices, containers, and some of the more forward-looking technologies in developing applications, but also a lot of automation tools around AI and ML. So bringing all that together is a lot of experimentation. So you're going to find that you may actually see costs go up a little bit, but over the out years, you're going to see costs drop. So think of it that way. Also, when you move from a license-based on-premises consumption model of these smart applications to a subscription-based, you have to be very careful about how you budget for that situation or scenario. We oftentimes see folks getting sticker shock, right? They move to the cloud, and at the end of 6 months or a year, they get a bill from the provider, and they say, oops, this is not what we expected. So think of it that way. Think of it, building smart applications more as a movement towards an agile and innovative, empowering your end users. And Ramesh talked about interaction. So these applications are not running in a siloed manner, that they're working with other applications that are existing in your enterprise, your organizational data center structure, but also from a B2B perspective, it's interacting with other third-party applications from your other vendors that you work with. So we like to think about assessing the architecture for the applications and infrastructure as sort of 5 R's, right? So first and foremost, what we call rehost. So what you do in that situation is you take the application and you simply do a lift and shift of the application into the cloud, right? Very minimal work involved there. The second piece is the refactoring. So you make light modifications to the applications, but again, the infrastructure, underlying architecture is slightly changed, right? So in other words, you take advantage of cloud attributes. What are they? So things like scalability, things like elasticity, things like multi-tenancy, things like metering, billing, chargeback. So when you start taking advantage of those, you're doing lift and shift with modifications. The third one is a re-architecting. You change the application, modify the application, but you also replace the underlying architecture, right? So you could take advantage of, for example, cloud capabilities, for example, EC2, for example, Redshift. You could take advantage of serverless, technology like Lambda, for example, right? And then the whole idea of rebuilding the application. This is where you basically, quote unquote, rewrite the application in that sense, and you rebuild it utilizing some capabilities of the application as is, but sort of rebuilding it from that perspective. But you replace the whole entire underlying architecture, right? So you can take advantage of all the potential capabilities, not just from an infrastructure as a service perspective, but also platform as a service perspective. You may use some advanced database as a service capabilities. You may use advanced middleware capabilities, and so on and so forth. And finally, replacing, where you're essentially gutting the old application. I like to call it, functionality migration rather than application migration. So you have an application A that does functionality 1, 2, and 3, and you now have application B, which looks nothing like application A, but does the same exact functionality in a whole new way, right? So think of it that way. So if you look at that, that perspective, one of the things we do a lot at Gartner is do look at trends. We look at, we conduct surveys, we talk to, thousands and thousands of folks like yourself. We talk to CIOs, we talk to, CTOs, CMOs, business leaders, IT architects, and so on. So one of the things that we asked is, which of the following initiatives are likely to impact your organization's software spending? So again, going back to what Ramesh mentioned earlier, we're seeing a spike and interest in spending around, obviously, the digital push. Companies are trying to reinvent themselves from being a staid, old world company to a digital business-oriented company, right? So, and then also, where's the role of AI and ML? Again, we're seeing an uplift in spending there, right? So moving on to sort of the next area of focus from a trends perspective, we're also seeing that most organizations are building new and rewritten applications. I talked about that in the first slide. But if you look at where the most effort is going, it's really going towards new applications running natively in the cloud. So the whole cloud native narrative. So 59% of folks said that they're really looking to transform their current applications to cloud native. So what are the applications that are being deployed in the cloud? So again, we asked our respondents, what kind of applications are prime candidates for moving to the cloud, right? You see the usual suspects like ERP, CRM, web collaboration. But also what's interesting is the IT operations and management, right? These are the applications that folks are really having difficulty with from a operationalized perspective, right? So when you start to make your journey to the cloud, it's not just going to an AWS or another provider and getting a pure play cloud service, but it's also the on-ramping onto those properties and assets, right? So at Gartner, we like to talk about these services as cloud-related services. So these are things like cloud management platforms, cloud service brokerage, and so on and so forth. So again, IT operations and management falls into the whole CMP narrative or cloud management platform narrative, and no surprise there that those applications are being run in an as-a-service mode by a large percentage of the organizations we talk to. And then, again, we ask around where the investment's going. We see that development services, I think I just move on too fast here. Yeah, development services is number one, right, for investment, because that's where folks are putting out money. They're hiring developers to get the application modernized and so on and so forth. So anyway, those are some of the trends. I'll take some questions in the end if you have, and then meanwhile, I'll pass it over to Shirish to talk about
Thank you.
the customer experience.
So I'm going to draw on my current role running a marketing services organization, working with many mid and large size companies, as well as my prior role as chief marketing officer of a Fortune 200 company for about a decade, to really talk about digital, using cloud to transform the entire go-to-market. And if you look at cloud and the challenge it poses to marketers, cloud gives us, as marketers, scalability, real-time responsiveness. It gives us everything we've always asked for. So the key question we all have is, now what? If you look at what we see in the marketplace right now, what we really discovered about the power of cloud, leading edge organizations are really transforming the approach to the front office. One we benchmarked a lot is Amazon. And I'll walk through exactly what they're doing. What we also see is the vast majority of corporations are far behind. And there are some very specific structural barriers in terms of the use of cloud the way we see it in the most advanced organizations. Hart Hanks and Wipro have partnered to really build an ecosystem to enable digital transformation in the front office quickly and cost effectively. And we believe fundamentally CIOs are critical to the transformation process and need to partner with CMOs. If you look at CRM marketing, basically the marketing around acquiring and retaining customers, in the old days it was a very expensive human-to-human, one-to-one interaction. First generation direct mail, very cost effective, but relatively depersonalized. When we got to digital, most organizations built separate digital systems, separate digital marketing organizations. It was multi-channel, different channels talking to the customer in different voices. What we see right now is the power of cloud to really go to omni-channel, one voice across all your tactics. And I'll give you some of examples of upsides by moving to true omni-channel. And then ultimately, what I call CRM 4.0, 50% of voice searches by one forecast expected to be voice, and the need for personalization will go up dramatically as we get to customers looking to things like voice interfaces. I won't go through all the metrics. Every metric you look at out there from a marketing perspective and sales perspective would tell you personalization pays off in terms of incremental conversion, incremental sales. It is a distinct competitive advantage. We are here at AWS. I think everyone knows one of the world's most customer-centric companies, Amazon, and they're built around that, providing a highly personalized, fast, and easy experience. But if you look at behind the scenes how they built some of their core processes on the commerce side, first, just to get from the first to the second page of the website, they run over 300 microservices. And a lot of that is actually tapping analytics in real time about the customer. Propensity to buy, behavioral, customer lifetime value. The ability to do that, you can't run those analytics on the fly. It's got to be staged. So the way they're doing this to drive that level of personalization is what they've actually created is they've turned the traditional customer data store into a real-time, analytically driven attribution of the customer. Tied to that, they've created a micro-content store of very rich content that is highly personalized, and there's lots of it, so they can actually take advantage of that insight they have at the actual customer level. And they built their overall experience and capabilities on the site to deliver that degree of personalization. What's surprising, Amazon Commerce, most companies are in some kind of digital transformation. And Amazon is the most benchmark company that I know of, yet we work with many, many large as well as mid-sized corporations. Not only do I not know anyone who's close, I don't even know folks who really have a plan to get there. And if you look at the structural barriers to getting there, from a personnel standpoint, thousands, Amazon obviously comes to the game with thousands of Hadoop engineers, economists, data scientists. Their investment scale is enormous. Obviously, we're all here as a representation of that. And time. It took a lot of time to get to this point. Just as before I step into how we do it, the way we think about the CIO relationship and what's changing is traditionally CIOs have been viewed as a cost center. If you think about Mark Andreessen saying software is going to eat the world, the need for corporations to think about software and capabilities as revenue generators as opposed to cost center become more and more critical. And that really requires moving to the front end of the product life cycle, not waiting for the level of maturity, using it as a competitive advantage, and forming the partnership with the CMO on how to take software and capabilities like AWS, like cloud, and turn that into revenue generation potential. And I think most organizations will be faced with this in their digital transformation process. Harte Hanks and Wipro, our goal was to be able to help our customers get to CRM 3.0, CRM 4.0, understanding those inherent barriers. Our goal was to deliver a solution that could get companies to 80% of where Amazon is at 1/10 the time and 1/10 the cost. We didn't do it just with ourselves and internal capabilities. We set up an ecosystem, starting with a partnership with Opera Systems that essentially shortcuts the building of a customer system of intelligence that manages at the customer level, analytically driven attribution, all the way through to the way we tune our agency. So if you think about the traditional creatives out there, they want to work on the next Apple brand campaign. Our approach is we need lots of inexpensive little bits of content to go with all those personalized insights. We actually take an approach of onshore, offshore, agile development and having a creative team that thrives on that. Very different than a traditional agency. We run one of the largest third-party data stores in the world, and I'll walk through it in a minute. You cannot believe the insights coming out from third-party data. All of that designed to bring folks to a level that's much closer to Amazon very quickly. It's the overall systems architecture we recommend, including we're working with a middleware solution for the entire front office, and really being driven by what I would call a system of intelligence, providing those insights at the individual customer level that are not traditional static insights like age, income, and psychographics, but real-time behavioral insights, even from the latest web traffic of the customer. The second piece, if you look at the third-party data that's out there, one of the things that's coming at every marketer is an unbelievable inundation of data. We're working with folks who want to sell their first-party data to us. We're working with a company that will give us raw location data off of cell phones. So the amount of insight you can get if you have the processing capabilities and approach is truly phenomenal. I wanted to just walk through what does transformation look like. And I want to take the most mundane marketing tactic I know of, direct mail. As CMO of a Fortune 500, I sent 50 million pieces of direct mail a year, practically deforested the Amazon. So the way I did it, my core process was every quarter I'd decide what worked, what didn't work, what were our offers, what's our creative theme, what were the best dates for the mail to be in home, like back to school, etc. We couldn't do much personalization. It was cheap, low-cost postcards, and we'd put a huge engine in place, crank it up. 7 weeks later, 4 million pieces a month fell out. And if I got to 1% response rate, I was doing backflips. What we're working on now with several companies is a complete transformation. They analyze, and we do too, digital traffic to identify the exact spot where it makes sense to send direct mail towards the middle, depending on the category, towards the middle to the end of the purchase process. That triggers in real-time direct mail. The technology used for small batch direct mail in that scenario is highly personalized, higher cost per piece, but triggered at a very specific time. The statistics that are surprising are companies are seeing 5 to 10% response rates, and an even more interesting number, 10 to 50x improvement over digital retargeting. The next generation of direct mail isn't optimizing the old model, it's using it as another and more powerful form of digital media in a true omni-channel to give you a tremendous bump in conversion. If you look at personalization, I'll give you an example. Little Caesars changed their new mover program from sending the address of the nearest Little Caesars to a new mover to a map from that new mover to the nearest store saw a huge lift. I'll give you one other example just so this transformation truly goes across all channels. As CMO of CenturyLink, we implemented real-time next best offer in our inside sales channel. So truly generating at the rep desktop, what's the next best offer for that specific customer? We saw a 12% lift in close rate immediately across 120,000 promo calls a week. So the power of the transformation, you cannot truly capture the value of cloud in the front office without transforming your core processes to capture the enormous improvement that's possible. If I were to end it, I would say this. If you look at CRM 4.0 and you're talking about voice search, all of a sudden personalization goes from a benefit, an upside in conversion, maybe some competitive advantage. But if you have a consumer talking to Alexa or Siri and you're not personalized, all of a sudden it looks like table stakes. So we're very passionate about what cloud can do for the front office and is required to do. That I'll turn it over to Glenn.
All right. I have my own micro. Maybe I don't. I'll take yours.
Suresh, so I guess I feel a bit smarter already. So I don't know about you guys. I know it's morning, but so we talked a lot about the customer experience side and how you're driving your customers to get smarter about the interaction with their customers. So just pivoting this a little bit, right? So Glenn, let's talk more about how we empower our own workers, right? Around that. Now, you co-founded a native cloud startup company, right? And I know you started out on the SaaS side of things. When did you start getting engaged with Amazon and AWS, and what has been your journey so far?
Well, just to set the context a little bit, Manish, we founded Aperio in 2006 as a pure cloud consulting company, and we aspired to create products as well. And we were acquired by Wipro last year, so we're now a Wipro company. But when we started as a Salesforce.com partner, we thought we saw a product opportunity in integrating Google for work with Salesforce. It's ironic that 10 years later, the two companies have now announced a partnership. But we were integrating those products 10 years ago, and we used AWS S3 and EC2 to synchronize your Google contacts and calendars with your Salesforce contacts and calendars. We extended the Salesforce storage model to gigabyte-sized attachments stored securely on S3. And we also extended Gmail to show CRM data in context with an EC2-based process. So we were AWS ISVs as early as 2007.
Wow. So since then, I know you have some of your mission-critical systems which are leveraging the power of AWS. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So those were our customer-facing products, and those are still used today, 10 years later, by thousands of customers, and they're still running on AWS. But our real move to AWS occurred in 2010. We created a product for our own consultants called the Cloud Management Center, or CMC. The idea of CMC is to run all of our projects through a common platform, a common unified suite that would handle project management, agile software development. We didn't like what we saw in Rally and Jira and some of the other alternatives, release management, and also analytics. And Salesforce was and still is our biggest partner, but we didn't think the Force.com platform was sufficient to handle all the needs of CMC. So right from the beginning of thinking about Sid's comments about the 5 R's of how to migrate an application, this would be a cloud-native application. We never had to migrate anything. We built right from the start significant components of CMC on the AWS platform. So Salesforce is the front end, but we use lots of parts of AWS for the back end. over time, Ramesh, this has turned into a smart application. I wouldn't say we were so smart in 2010 as to think that's what we were building. We just thought we needed storage and CPU, but it's evolved from there. So let me talk a little bit about some of the architecture of CMC and talk about where AWS fits in and where Salesforce's App Cloud platform fits in. So we think of Salesforce as basically the brains of CMC, and AWS is the brawn. And we needed a lot of brawn because we've got over 1,100 customers in CMC. We have run over 14,000 sprints in various projects through CMC. We're now over 300,000 user stories, and we're just collecting all these huge piles of data about our projects. No way we could have possibly fit that into Salesforce. So for starters, we store our customers' metadata from their cloud environments, like their Salesforce orgs, their Google domains, their Workday tenants. We store all that data in an Amazon S3 buckets. We store metadata about the metadata, that is metrics, in a DynamoDB. And that's become pretty huge over the years. That's over 40 terabytes at this point of data about our customers' environments. We sort of think of it as analogous to an IoT situation where a customer's Salesforce org is throwing off these thousands of data points constantly about how they're using Salesforce and about how they're doing our projects on Salesforce. So we're collecting all of these data points in a gigantic store on DynamoDB. So now let's talk about the CMC architecture a little bit. It's got a pretty extensive API. We built CMC in a highly componentized way, and our customers can also use the API, and there's a CloudFront interface in front of that API. And thank goodness we did it that way, because we've spent a good portion of the last year porting over a lot of the back end of that API from EC2 to an API gateway / Lambda architecture. And we've done that seamlessly because CloudFront is in front of that whole mess, and the API consumers don't know the difference. Throw in a Lambda and API gateway. Our ambition is to get off of EC2 altogether, get 100% onto Lambdas. We're not there yet. When we do get there, we're still going to have some long-running batch jobs on EC2, so EC2 will be in our runtime at least until such time as AWS figures out how to give us long-running jobs on Lambda. We also have a scheduler. We call out to our customers' environments all the time, and we use CloudWatch as our scheduler. We build an SQS queue of jobs, and those jobs are executed on EC2. The last bit I'll talk about, Manish, is Cloud Search. So if any of you run Salesforce as your CRM, the search engine's pretty basic. It doesn't give you a sophisticated set of search options. We have something we call the Cloud Asset Library, which is reusable software components that we own the IP for, that we use from project to project. It's a nice repository. It's about 3,000 assets and growing, but we needed an effective search engine because you can imagine the different ways that you need to match up assets to types of projects. So we used AWS Cloud Search in front of our Cloud Asset Library. So at this point, the back end is so interwoven between AWS and Force.com, but to a user, it just looks like a Salesforce application.
And that's great. So I know you touched upon this a little bit, right? But did you start out, or would you call it that this is a smart application, the way that Ramesh described it?
Right. So in keeping with the terminology of the day, and I think it's a great taxonomy to think about what's the difference between an app, which we've all built, and a smart application. Are we taking advantage of the huge amounts of data that we're collecting and using that in any way to benefit our customers? I think we are, first in the sense that CMC is collecting these data points, an architecture we've had from the beginning, but as the scale of AWS and the costs have come down and the performance has gone up, we've cranked up how much we're collecting about our customers. So at the very least, we're aware of probably the most aware application in the entire taxonomy of a customer's architecture of what they're using their cloud environments for. I think CMC knows more about their apps than the customer knows. So we have this great awareness kind of situation with CMC that we're converting into intelligence. In the beginning, intelligence just meant dear customer, here's your metrics. Look at your trends. Your burn downs are good, they're bad. Your growth is in the top 1% or the bottom 1% of our customer base. Over time, we've tried to make the app smarter and use the intelligence or create intelligence from all the data we're collecting. I'll give a very simple example. CMC is a release management tool. And so our users create manifest item packages to move from Salesforce dev to QA to production, that sort of thing. And it handles the release management. We try now to suggest what should go into those packages. We know what the users have been touching. We know the artifacts that are associated with user stories that have had a lot of recent activity. And when they go to build a package, we propose, hey, you might want to put X, Y, and Z in that package. It looks like it's been hot. So at this point, saves the user's time, and it definitely reduces deployment errors to make sure you catch everything that's supposed to be in the deployment. The last bit that we've experimented with this year in the realm of smart apps is the building of chatbots. CMC has a lot of sophisticated developers, and it's also got a lot of end users, people that are just there to sort of double check user stories. And so we're trying to give them a conversational interface. So we've built a set of chatbots that can answer simple questions like, give me a list of all the stories I'm assigned to. We use AWS Lex for natural language understanding. We convert those queries into intents and then ultimately into API calls. And we give the customer an answer that, in the old days they would have had to know how to write a Salesforce report. Now they just ask the chatbot, and we serve up lists of things like, here's all my stories. So, frankly, it all seems a little primitive to us so far because, our roadmap is to really give our customers the benefit of all this intelligence we're collecting. We want to start to use machine learning to observe patterns about our customers' projects and basically give them early warning. We've seen 14,000 projects. We can see the fingerprint of 14,001, and it doesn't look so good, or maybe it looks really good based on our past data, and give them warnings about are their sprints too long or too short? Are there story points in unusual areas of a spectrum, things like that. So using the intelligence to the benefit of the customer.
That's great. So I think we'll pivot a little bit. I know we heard from Shirish about how he's driving, basically improving the customer experience. Glenn talked about from a work experience what they build. Now, I know you spend more than half your time on planes, right? You meet with global 1,000 customers all the time, right? Just talk us through basically when you're interacting with these very large organizations, right, with very diverse needs, and they're in some journey or other in terms of building the smart applications. How do you really help them deploy, manage, operate these smart applications at scale?
Yeah, I head the global infrastructure services business, and our first goal is to advise customer to get into cloud. We take a first cloud approach, and I'm sure in a couple of years down the line, it will become an only cloud approach. So, and coming to Manish, the question what you asked, smart applications are used by the internal users as well as the external users, and they use traditional methodology of logging in as well as a non-traditional methodology, which has becoming a traditional, like using a mobile and wearable devices, etc. Now, first important thing from a smart application from a user perspective is to get a seamless end user experience while using the application. So for that, the first fundamental block which has to be in place is a compute, storage, network, security, and the way authentication happens. So that determines the end user experience which comes in from a user perspective. Second important block is the orchestration and automation layer which has to be in place. And third important thing which has evolved over a period of time is how cognitive and machine learning is being used to ensure that the seamless user experience is taken care of. So we at Wipro have rolled out a framework called Boundaryless Data Center Framework, which is more a marketplace which enables customer to get into deployment, usage, operate, run, and then optimize of a smart applications from an infrastructure layer perspective. And there are enormous examples of we helping customer to get their cloud journey concluded. For example, I'll give you an example of a customer in US who is using surveillance through a drone on Amazon Cloud. So obviously the places where human being cannot reach, drones are used for a surveillance perspective. The data is picked up by the drone and get fed through Amazon cloud so that the analytical engine can be used to do a further processing of the data points. So these are the examples which are available. Various customers are at the various journey of their cloud adoption, and our aim is to ensure that they succeed in that journey with the proper security in place.
So I think it's building upon that, right? So when you have so much development going on in an organization, right, you don't really have the horsepower to really support everybody, right? So DevOps and automation of the DevOps becomes very important, right? So can you just share your perspective around how that is evolving?
Yeah, so that is an interesting point, right? And in the legacy way, when the applications were being built, the entire development used to take certain weeks to get the development done. Testing used to take maybe a few days to get the testing done, and there used to be a stringent norm to get the release management done. So if you figure it out, in the past, it used to take about anywhere between 3 to 6 months, and probably Shirish can give more data points from a perspective, or Apirio can talk about what used to happen 10 years back. It used to take about 3 to 6 months to get any application deployed in a customer environment. Obviously, the business expectations have significantly changed over a period of time. Now, business is not willing to wait for 3 to 6 months. They're willing to wait maybe a few days now, or they want an instant result perspective. And hence, there is a concept of continuous integration and continuous deployment which has come in place, and that's where the DevOps integration becomes extremely critical to get these things done. Using Chef and Puppet programmable languages are being used to get this CI and CD done regularly. Again, one more example of one of our customer where we have helped them to get their digital marketing campaign implemented through Amazon Cloud, where campaign gets redeveloped quite regularly based on the user feedback which is coming in, and it is fed again so that the campaign gets revised at a significantly regular interval. And those things are possible only because of our DevOps automation which is being implemented by customer.
So I know smart applications have a lot of inputs, right? You have people using them on mobile, you have devices all over the place, IoT. When you have so many distributed endpoints which are providing you data and interacting with these applications, right? How do you handle that fault tolerance, that performance at scale?
Yeah, interesting question. So if you look at traditionally, the NOC used to take care of all the monitoring work from an infrastructure perspective, and monitoring can usually takes care of all the known related issues, and they will pass on an alert to the administrator to ensure that alert is taken care of. But gone are the days where only known issues come in, right? You get a lot of unknown issues, and if intelligence of unknown issues and management of unknown issues are not taken care of, then obviously the things cannot work appropriately. And that's where the concept of algorithm intelligence has come in from an operations perspective. So currently, the automation which is happening at the customer end, or the monitoring which is happening at the customer end, has to take care of algorithm intelligence using an AI platform in such a way that the unknown issues not only get detected and reported, it gets fixed also. So from a Wipro perspective, we have our own artificial intelligence framework, which we call as the HOMES. We are using that artificial intelligence framework to ensure that unknown not only gets monitored and reported, it gets healed also.
So I think in all that, I know Shirish, you touched upon this. I know said you talked about a little bit, right? But security is becoming even more important, right? And the dynamics around that. So can you talk about like what impact do these smart applications have from a security operations perspective?
Yeah, so security continues to be extremely important, and the surveys show that 81% of the organizations are worried that security can be a concern from a cloud perspective. Every transformation layer need to have a security as a quite embedded thing into the work, right? Today you see the users access all the devices through various means of access, right? It can be a laptop, mobile, wearable devices based access. Your data is getting stored either through a OneDrive method or a data lake perspective. Users can access from anywhere in the globe. Every country has their own security standard norms, etc. the business defines that what kind of access mechanism has to be in place, and hence security becomes extremely critical to ensure that the appropriate security norms has been taken care of, compliance has been taken care of, and we at Wipro has a separate group which focuses on cyber security and risk and compliance perspective, and we work very closely from an infrastructure perspective from that group. So they ensure that we are on a continuous compliance basis. We have a various tools and technologies available, including some of the startups which we have tied up, which can give us not only a continuous compliance, but threat intelligence, threat management perspective. We have also built a security solution called CloudWatch, which keeps on ensuring that it keeps on giving us an alert from a security perspective so that we ensure that the environment runs quite secure from a peace of mind perspective.
Thanks, Kiran. I know some of you would have questions, right? So I don't want to hog all the things, but just quickly want to summarize, and then we will go to the audience questions, right? So I know Ramesh talked about what smart applications are, shared this industry perspective, and what customers that he interacts with and the organization interacts with. Shirish talked about what he has built, right, in terms of how that aware and intelligent application can help drive engagement with the customers. Glenn talked about how he's running a mission-critical application, right, heavily using some of the most advanced features that AWS has to offer. And Kiran really talked about how do you really help run basically efficiently, right? How do you really automate the operations to manage and handle these smart applications? So thanks for your time. I think we will open up for a few questions. You had one here?
Yeah. When you pass to the cloud, you did some modifications to your languages. You did a pass from, I don't know, C# or Java to Golang, Python, PHP. And if you did, how was this transition and how difficult it was?
I suppose I'll start. We normally recruit Java developers. They just have once you learn the structure of an object-oriented language, we can convert your skills. As far as languages used in our projects, I think JavaScript and familiarity with the JavaScript libraries is much more of a current issue for us, finding people that can create UX compliant frameworks. We have the advantage of not having to migrate a legacy staff, I suppose. But one thing we see with our customers is encouraging CIOs to look at cloud as a career opportunity for their teams, and B, as a future proofing. If you're still running on-premise applications, vendors that have not gotten the cloud religion, you're putting your enterprise in jeopardy because those skills are dwindling quickly. And people graduating from college today don't want to support a Siebel system. So we kind of pivot that and turn it into a career opportunity.
Any other questions? Shirish, I had a question for you, right? So I know you touched upon this. Oh, sorry. Yeah, please.
So when you're a small startup and you have something in the neighborhood of hundreds of users instead of thousands or millions, what steps would you take to prepare and scale, taking an app that maybe has 5 or 6 of these components but not enough, especially with the intelligence and, there's no machine learning, there's no big data that I have yet. How do you apply the lessons you've learned to a very small kind of startup that wishes to scale?
I can answer that first,
Sure.
Since we were a small startup, which became a big startup. We thank our lucky stars every day that we separated interface from implementation. Right from the beginning when we built our first AWS processes on EC2. So think big. I remember when we started Aperio, we thought, let's build a company that could have 1,000 employees. Every process we put in place, we thought about 1,000. Turned out that was too small, but you should be thinking in terms of thousands and millions of users. But separating interface from implementation has allowed us to migrate from EC2 runtimes to API Gateway Lambda functions. Over the years, it's enabled a lot of other architectural migrations. So that's my one bit of advice.
So
I can talk a little bit about what we see when I, as an analyst, talk to folks like yourself, and what are they going through. My advice is always sort of walk before you can run, right? You don't have to use all the esoteric stuff around AI and ML right away. It's more about understanding the portfolio of your applications and what the nuances of the applications are, and look at it from sort of the business perspective, the technology perspective, the operational perspective, right? And cost, of course. So, what are the dependencies of the application? What's the risk to the application if you move it to the cloud? What is it? What are the parameters in terms of perform CPU, I/O, networking bandwidth? One of the things I'd like to talk about is when we move an application to the cloud, people just think of the compute and storage aspects, but forget about the connectivity model, because now the application is running away from your data center, which still needs to interact with other applications that haven't moved, or perhaps the data can move due to governance or compliance reasons. So thinking about those aspects, at Gartner we've published research around this, right? We talk about the APM model and the IPM model, the application performance model and the infrastructure performance model. So really it's a detailed flowchart of sorts, and going and subjecting every application through that rigor is the key, not to think about solving world hunger from that perspective.
The one thing I'd say, having been on the other side of it, a company with a lot of advantages in terms of scale, but our systems were designed in the 60s. So the architect, I think thinking ahead to everything that's coming and getting your architecture as future-proofed as possible, as open as possible, take advantage of the future is really where I see the born in the cloud companies having a huge advantage. So making good architectural decisions that will give you flexibility. I'll give you a simple example. I mean, nobody could do anything about it, but we were a large telco, third largest in the country. I had to go to code to do a pricing change in consumer. It was a 6-month cycle to make a pricing change because our system was developed before relational database technology. I hate to say that, but that's what it was. And there were so many places where I could have changed the custom. I'll give you a simple example, and this will be surprising, but one of the things that was tough for us was the multi-dwelling unit market, the apartment market. People moved a lot. We spent a lot of money to acquire them. We launched a product called CenturyLink On. You come in, you sign up, give us your credit card. We never talk to you, you get gigabit. No acquisition costs. What surprised us was not the reduction of acquisition costs. Our average penetration was 75% in 6 months. We were wiping the cable company off the planet. But when we got back into our architecture, because we hadn't built a microservices-based architecture, it was, we'd all design a telco to be that experience if we were starting now versus when it was, but it was too hard-coded for us to make that fundamental change. Same thing would be the way you manage your personalization data about your customer. The architectural choices you make right now are going to live with you for a long time, and your real advantage of lack of scale sits in that architecture and the ability to adapt.
Thank you. I think we have time for just one last question. No? Okay, cool. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time.